Today I want to talk about the fallen angels. There's a mysterious book called the Book of Enoch. It's one of the Apocrypha, and it was referred to in early Christian literature and in the Zohar. You can read it yourself. The first of the chapters of the Book of Enoch is called The Watchers. And in this book, it gives a couple of stories about what the fallen angels are. And they called the fallen angels the Watchers in that book. Now, in the first explanation, and the one most commonly referred to, talks about how the angels were smitten by human women, and they just kind of fell in lust with human women. And they had this leader angel called Semihaza, and they descended to earth and they mated with these women. By mating with these women, they had offspring, which were giants. And they were considered evil giants called the Nephilim. You can read in Genesis, I'll read it to you, the section out of Genesis. It says, "Man began to increase on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born to them. The Bene Ha-Elohim saw that the daughters of man were good, and they took themselves wives from whomever they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also later. The Bene Ha-Elohim had come to the daughters of man and had fathered them. The Nephilim were the mightiest ones who ever existed, men of renown." So this idea of these superhuman forces mating with humans and then having these offspring were obviously borrowed from Greek mythology. And that Greek mythology, that's how Heracles, the hero, was born, or the Roman Hercules. That's how he was born. Zeus mated with a mortal woman. In Genesis, it says, "While we were there, we saw the Nephilim. They were the sons of Anak, who descended from the original Nephilim. We felt like tiny grasshoppers. That's all we were in their eyes." That's when Moses sent scouts into Canaan. That's what they came back with, the reports. Anak refers to giants. And you can see mentions of them in Deuteronomy and Joshua as well. So if you look at the root word of Nephilim, it means to fall. And that's probably where they became associated with intermarriage between angels and human. Now, in Genesis, the term Bene Elohim means the sons of Elohim, or the sons of the gods, or sons of God, were eventually translated into believing that they were talking about fallen angels. The Bene Elohim were thought to be fallen angels by Christians. But really, that's not true. That whole story is nothing more than a morality play based on what was going on in ancient Israel at the time when it was written. You've got to remember that the ancient Israelites were very afraid of mating or marrying outside of their tribe. In fact, they tended to mate with their first cousins. They were so paranoid about their bloodlines. And so when you think of Bene Elohim, the sons of Elohim, meaning the fallen angels, that's not accurate. It means the men of Israel. That's the sons of God were the sons of Israel. Now, when they were mating with the daughters of men, that is hearkening back to the beginnings of how the whole Judaic, Israeli, and Hebrew matrilineal tradition started. Because even in modern Judaism, you are Jewish if your mother is Jewish. So if you think about that, when these sons of God, if they mated with somebody outside of their tribe, then they were no longer considered part of the tribe. And so they were so focused on keeping their bloodlines pure that they created this story that if you mate outside of your tribe, you're going to have demonic offspring. That story of the Nephilim wasn't really the fallen angels. But in that book of Enoch, they give another explanation, another story of the fallen angels, which is a lot more accurate as far as I'm concerned. This is more about the angels falling, meaning coming back to earth to help, coming to earth to help, giving so-called forbidden knowledge to mankind. Now remember, in that story, that creation myth in the Bible, where Yahweh gets so mad and has such a hissy fit and throws everybody out of the garden and curses the serpent and just goes wild, that, from a Gnostic point of view, is not the creator that's doing that. That's a projection of our minds onto the creator. That is the ego that's doing that. That is anything but the creator that is doing that. The creator wouldn't have a hissy fit, would not abuse its creations. If you think about even in the New Testament, the God the Father that Jesus taught about had nothing to do with a deity of that kind of temperament. When the angels came to basically save human beings from savagery, which was what was depicted by that Yahweh character in that story, Yahweh got mad. Yahweh didn't like that. So that was forbidden. That was forbidden knowledge. But really, if you look in the Book of the Watchers, the angel that is the leader of that was named Asael. Asael. And that is obviously synonymous with Lucifer or Lumiel. The name Asael then became Azazel in Leviticus, and that was when the scapegoat was named Azazel and forced out into the desert to die for the sins of everybody. What a horrible thing. The emphasis is usually on that first story, all those scary giants, which from my point of view was not anything other than a morality play. But the second explanation makes a lot more sense, because the theme of forbidden knowledge, the angels teaching things like sorcery and spells and roots and herbs and medicines. It says in Enoch in chapter 8, you can read it yourself. It says, "And Asael taught the men to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and the coloring tinctures. Shemihaza taught spellbinding and the cutting of roots. Armaros, the resolving of enchantments. Barachiel taught the auguries of lightning. Kokabel, the auguries of the stars. Zekel, the auguries of fireballs. Arachiel, the auguries of the earth. Shimsiel, the auguries of the sun. And Sariel, the auguries of the moon." So in reading that, they're talking about that Asael taught blacksmith, metallurgy, mineralogy, the chemistry underlying cosmetics. Shemihaza taught practical magic and herbal medicine. Armaros taught psychology. Barachiel, the interpretation of the weather. Kokabel taught astrology. Zekel, meteorology. Arachiel, geology. Shimsiel and Sariel, the cycles of the month and the year, and the lore of the seasons for farming. In other words, all of these angels are teaching the savage humans how to be civilized. They're teaching civilization to human beings. So ancient intelligences, perfected intelligences, coming back to earth to help human beings to lift themselves out of savagery. Two different traditions about who the fallen angels are. Very, very distinct traditions about what the fallen angels are. One in which there's these these rebel angels who have an insatiable sexual lust for women, and this other story with very compassionate beings coming to help humankind. And you can't really reconcile them both unless you think about what they really are. One is to teach not to marry outside of the tribe based on very problematic teachings of intermarriage. And then the other is about the idea of the ancient intelligences helping early humankind to find civilization and to help themselves live more comfortable and productive lives on Earth. You can see that the second one really is very similar to the Greek myth of Prometheus. So Asael and Prometheus are very similar kinds of characters, because they're rebelling against this dictatorial God figure. One being Zeus in that story. He was very dictatorial and not caring about human beings. And Yahweh is fulfilling that role in this particular story in the Bible. And so in that way, both Asael or Lucifer and Prometheus are acting like the hero. In the Greek version of it, Zeus got so angry that he sent Pandora with this box. And her curiosity was so much that she couldn't help it. She had to open the box, and then all of the ills of humanity were set free, all except hope, which when she shut the box, hope stayed. What's so different about that versus Eve in the Garden of Eden? In the final verse of the Book of Watchers, Yahweh gives a message. He wants Enoch to tell this to the Watchers. He says, "You were in heaven, and there was no secret that was not revealed to you. Unspeakable secrets you knew. And these you made known to women in the hardness of your heart. And by these secrets, females and mankind multiplied evils on the earth. Say to them, therefore, you shall have no peace." That's what he was saying to those fallen angels. So that was the idea of how evil came into the world. Before Christianity was an influence, Genesis wasn't ever thought of as depicting an original sin, and that was the fall of mankind. It was simply a mythological explanation as to how human beings came to know the difference between good and evil, and why they started wearing clothes, and why they started farming, and why childbirth is painful, and why things like that happen. But the term fallen angels is really a misnomer, because the Watchers didn't fall. They chose to return, to help. Now, there's this Enochian text called Jubilees. And in Jubilees, they say that during Enoch's father's lifetime, the angels who were called Watchers descended to earth to teach human beings to do what is just and upright. So the task of that head angel, Asael or Lucifer or Lumiel, is simply to educate human beings. So that sacred wisdom for human beings to have better lives. And to do this is, according to ancient tradition, how one of the ways in which Lumiel or Lucifer is repaying a debt that he owes for speeding up things. Remember, the hidden story that we talked about before when we were talking about Lucifer is he was impatient. He thought, why not give them everything? Why not give them everything? And that caused problems. And so the idea is that coming to teach again and again and again and again is how Lucifer repays his debt. The ultimate reason why Lucifer, Lumiel, Asael is an important thing to understand is it represents human beings thinking for themselves rather than thinking along the lines of just the group mind. Gurdjieff taught that we're all just basically robots walking around here asleep. And we talk about that a lot in our own discussions here as everybody's like kind of in this dream world. We're sort of like the Walking Dead. We're just going along with the group mind. And when we start thinking for ourselves, that's Lucifer. That's Lumiel. That's Asael. That is the fallen angels or the Watchers teaching us how to wake up to the reality. Not because they're evil, not because they fell because of being punished, but because they're returning to help us. It's to awaken us. If you have that book called The Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky, there's a quote in there that's interesting. It says, Lucifer represents life, thought, progress, civilization, liberty, independence. Lucifer is the Logos, the serpent, the savior. So this means that the light bearer in this sense is that which enlightens the mind. This is not the evil devil as taught by most people. It's not Satan. It's very different. The great creator is not the God of that story of the Garden of Eden. The creator is something outside of that. The creator is all loving. So Lucifer, in that sense, is an emissary of that creator, of the true creator, to help us when we are being controlled by that character in the Garden of Eden that calls himself God, which is really our own ego mind, which is that part of our minds that wants to restrict us and keep us asleep and not ask questions and not know anything, just to be an automaton, right? So that's what Lucifer, Asael, and all of those watchers, those fallen angels represent, is that spark within us that wants to wake up, to think for ourselves, to have not independence from our creator, but independence from our ego mind, independence from the group mind, independence from that which restricts us from being at one with perfection. One other interesting quote from Jung, he said, "It's also worth noting that Lucifer, the morning star, means Christ as well as the devil." And he's referring to that book of Revelations where it says, Jesus saying, "I am the root and the offspring of David, the bright and the morning star." So recognizing that Lucifer is not the same thing as Satan. They are not synonymous. Satan in the Old Testament is like the prosecutor of God. Is sort of like the one that accuses. And that's not what the job of Lucifer is in arcane teachings. The job of Lucifer is to enlighten and is to save us from our own ego mind, from our own group consciousness, from our own asleepness, to wake us up into the glory of the truth. And that is that we are one with our Creator and all is well. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me today. I so appreciate you. Until next time, blessed be.